Welcome to Big Blend Radio with your hosts, Lisa and Nancy, editors of BigBlendMagazine.com.
Hey everybody, welcome to Big Blend Radio with Nancy and Lisa, the publishers of Big Blend magazines and a mother-daughter travel team traveling the country on our Love Your Parks tour. One area we have not been to yet is Massachusetts, Rhode Island, New England. But we're coming for you. We're coming for you. We're going to be there close. We're going to be there soon. But anyway, we're excited because our guest today is author Brian-LeBeau, and he's joining us to talk about his debut novel. It is called A Disturbing Nature, and it is disturbing, right, Nancy? You're reading it, but she's read it enough to know what's going on, and know the characters, but not to spill the beans. It is out now through Books Fluent, and it is a psychological and insightful thriller, and it profiles a killer and an investigator in the post-Vietnam War era of New England. So, Brian, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm well. How are you doing, Lisa?
Doing good, doing good. Nancy and I have not been to New England yet. Are we missing out?
You have never been to New England, or you just haven't been to New England on the latest tour?
No, on this tour. Well, our tour is nonstop. We document parks and public lands for our Parks and Travel magazine. We're going to Maryland in the next couple of weeks. We'll be there. We're going to do Connecticut, so that's kind of New Englandy, isn't it? No,
it's just outside, but that's okay.
We did Pennsylvania.
That's outside as well.
Okay, so we haven't done Maine. So New England is really like Massachusetts, right?
Massachusetts, Rhode Island, New Hampshire,
Vermont,
Maine.
That's
no.
We haven't done any of that yet. We're going to have to do that now.
It's the last part left.
Well, and you are missing something. But if you wait a couple of months, you'll hit probably about 3.5 months, you'll hit the best time of year to be in New England because you have the foliage changing, and it's really, I don't know that it's like that anywhere else in the country. I'll just put it that way. I've been all over the country. I think I've only not been to 2 states. I've not seen any place as pretty as New England in the fall.
We've been to Pennsylvania in the fall, and we will be in Pennsylvania and Wisconsin this fall. So just a short drive and we could go to your murder scenes, right?
Well, I mean, it all depends on what a short drive is to you, but yes. I mean, I had an office in Mechanicsburg, Pennsylvania, just outside of Harrisburg, Pennsylvania.
Okay, we've been there, yeah.
Years. And it's another beautiful place that I strongly considered moving to more than a decade ago. I love it.
So your book is set in Massachusetts, and you've got a killer, and you're getting into the killers that just don't stop. It's like an appetite for killers, right? These serial killers, like Jack the Ripper, he just kept going. He's just ripping through people, literally. So it seems that that's something that fascinates you. I know you live in California now, but why did you decide, okay, New England is my setting for this? And why is there a killer lurking there?
Well, number one, I grew up in Fall River, Massachusetts. So I actually lived the first 30 years of my life in southern New England, between Fall River and up in Worcester, Massachusetts as well. I taught at Bryant College, which is a central focus, a primary location of the book. And so I understood that geography as well. So the book takes place in southern New England, where I lived for many years and worked for many years. And then the memory scenes all predominantly come from Fauquier County, Virginia. I also lived there. So when you're seeing these, they've been researched, but I also lived in every location. So I knew where everything was. I researched by going back several times to every location, make sure that I had documented it correctly to make it as accurate as possible. So everything in the book is accurate. Even the weather is accurate. When we talk about the serial killers in the book, the true crime serial killers in the book, everything is accurate in terms of the days of what's happening and what occurred. But what I've done is dropped in this fictional serial killer, this fictional FBI chief investigator, who then becomes a part of that team or leads the team through the investigation. So, but everything else was intended to be accurate. So I had all these constants, and the variables would be these 2 primary characters and their interaction with the secondary characters. The reason behind a serial killer is I do have a tremendous interest from a very young age. Growing up in Fall River, you get indoctrinated with Lizzie Borden.
Oh,
And
that's
so
right. Yes.
I can remember being in 5th grade and I went to the Lizzie Borden Museum for the first time. It's actually the Fall River Historical Society, but if you go, it's
No
really the
way.
Lizzie Borden Museum because there's not much else. It talks about the
Well, that's
textile
funny.
city from the previous century, but really it's about Lizzie Borden predominantly. So I was fascinated. And then shortly after that, I had the opportunity to see Laurence Olivier narrate The World at War, which is by far the
Wow.
greatest World War II documentary ever made. Seriously, if you've never seen it, you're missing out. You'll understand World War II from it. And it just became a lifelong interest in what creates a psychopath, whether they're a dictator or whether they're just a mass murderer or a serial killer. What mindset creates that? I've been fascinated by it from a young age. I've traveled all over the world to go to World War II sites in the Pacific and in Europe and Africa, to be able to see those locations, just to kind of get a feel for the topography, the geography, the people, and so forth. It's just fascinates me. And so it was going to enter the book. There's no question.
That's interesting about, going World War II and then you go into post Vietnam too, and that connection when you talk, I mean, look at Hitler, right? So in a way, he's a serial killer. And a lot of us look at them, these dictators, but we don't look at him as like a Jack the Ripper. For some reason, yet these people created like mass murder. We just did an interview, actually, it's airing the day before your interview is airing, on what's happening in Syria. And you think about, here's that guy still in office, and all these people are getting murdered. It's the same thing, even just Russia and all of that. But when you think about these dictators, Idi Amin, like you talk about Africa,
but they're not
serial killers in a way. And I wonder, is it a power? Is it like when it's on that level, is this ego and crazy power, like money is not everything to them? It's beyond that. Like you could have all the money you could have, but the power, but now it's like killing is upper power to them. Does that make sense? You know what I mean? It's weird.
It does. Nancy, did you want to add something? I'll answer that question. Nancy, did you want to add something?
I always feel like it's a huge insecurity in the person that is strike or be striked. So you want to strike first.
Yeah.
And I think it's insecurity and fear.
Yep.
And it is also, there's something, it's not like they're when you look at dictators like Hitler, it's not like he personally killed all these people. He ordered others to do it, which is far easier than doing it yourself.
It's much easier than getting your hands dirty. But
Exactly.
I think you're both right there. I think typically what psychologists will say is it's fear and control. In many cases, serial killers, mass murderers, despots, these individuals that place very low value on life or no value on others' lives. It's that they've come from homes where their father or their grandfather or just the treatment that they've received in the environment has created a fear of isolation and pain and so forth that then generates them wanting to be able to control those factors later. And they do that by showing that they're in control. And that becomes, as they age, it moves from putting themselves in positions where they can control either verbally. And so you'll see that in a lot of cases with people that are very dominant, right? Relationships that you watch where the husband or the wife is clearly in control. And they use that really through belittlement, sometimes physical abuse, to control the relationship. And that in some cases can develop into these serial killers, which we use the term mass murder throughout Disturbing Nature because serial killer wasn't defined until John Wayne Gacy. The FBI defined it when they were arresting him in the late 70s, 79, I believe. And then it became like a media term in 1980 during his court case. So before that time, people like Disturbing Nature, the Pastoral Predator and Disturbing Nature were referred to as mass murderers. And that's why you'll see that term used as you move through the book. Again, we were going for historical accuracy, but I think it always comes down to fear and control. And even whether when we look at someone like a Mussolini or an Adolf Hitler, inevitably they get the secondary effects, which are the wealth and the tremendous living style, treated like a king and so forth. But in reality, what they really want is to be noticed, not to be afraid, and to be able to control the situation. And I think you'll find that's true for every person that's capable of diminishing the value of other people's lives around them.
What about all these people these copycat killers too? That's an interesting thing, how you have a crime, and it's like, even with these shootings we have across the country, it's like you don't want to say who the shooter was because then someone's going to copy it, So it's kind of this weird thing. It's like one begets the other one. It's like, we were saying earlier to you, we went through a lot of wildfires, and some of the wildfires we went through were arson copycats. And it was just like, what is wrong with you people? So when you're doing your research, how many times did you go, what is wrong with you?
Well, if you think about what the motive would likely be in that scenario, again, it becomes fear. As we age, when we grow up and as we age, we all kind of have this hidden desire to be someone that matters. And that relevance drives us to do things that we hope other people will notice. But for many of us, there's a disappointment that comes with that as well. As we age, we start wondering, a lot of people, particularly in middle age, will start wondering, have I done anything that matters? And so an easy way what appears on the surface anyway, I shouldn't say an easy way, but what sometimes can appear to a sick mind to be an easy way to gain notoriety, because at some point they don't care whether it's positive or negative, is to maybe attempt an assassination like Hinckley did on, was it Reagan? Was Hinckley Reagan? I think so. So, and when they asked him, what did he say? He said, well, you know my name now, right?
Oh, see?
It's just a different motive for fear, the fear that we will live our life in obscurity and die and nobody will care. And so for some people, that's a very tangible fear that they have. For most of us, we place it on the back burner with all the other fears that we have, and it probably ranks much lower. But for some people, it's extraordinarily high, similar to the person who shot John Lennon. I can't remember his name off the top of my head.
Yeah, and what was that,
That's because John Lennon had real estate and Yoko Ono did it all. No, I'm kidding. No, she, no, it's a war of Yoko Ono and the guy, Chapman, I think his last name was.
I think you're right. And think about the BTK killer, right? BTK. He stretched from 74 to 91 or 2, I think. And they believe that the motive when he finally made his mistake was the same as most serial killers. Deep down, they want to be caught because they want people to know what they've done.
That's why they leave things
they
on
don't get their fame. If they get away with it, then
that drives home the point that there's this motivation psychologically that they don't want to be forgotten. It's also why a lot of killers, even though they fight very hard that they didn't commit the murders during the course of court cases and so forth, will later not only own up to the crimes that they're committed of or accused of, but will add others onto it. Even lying to increase the number so that they have even more notoriety.
But they have branding. They have branding. It's like a killer will go, okay, I'm going to give each person, I'm going to take their tongue off or something, or you know what I mean? They're going to leave an X, or they leave a clue on each body, and they get their nicknames over how they do the crime. I mean, Jack the Ripper got known for being the Ripper, So it's everyone they have branding, which is fascinating. But we could talk about serial killers all day long, because we could get into the cartels too, because that's another form of serial killing. But let's give everyone an overview of A Disturbing Nature. And it's a good thing, Nancy, I know she'll tell everything about the character. She's all in it, but give everyone an overview of the story and what led you to it.
Sure. Well, what led me to it was a dream in 1989. Wow. I woke up in the middle of the night, probably about 3 or 4 in the morning, sweating. And I just remembered a whole host of seminal moments in my life, things that had happened in my life that when I woke up, I really couldn't explain, but I didn't question them when I was younger. Because you just don't think about those things when you're 8 and 10 and 12. But when you get older, you start wondering, why did that happen? And as I got up and I started thinking through all of them, I realized I didn't have answers, and it was scary. So I jotted down about 4 pages of notes, and those notes really became What is a Disturbing Nature? And what really rolls out to be all 4 volumes, or all 4 books in the series. So it's based on a young man who was in his early 20s, like Mo Lumen. He was someone that I used to trade baseball cards with. So I was 11 years old in 1975, and you'll note that the intellectual age of Mo in 1975 is 11, despite the fact that he's 24 years old. Mo represents the one side of my personality, which is the same for everyone. We have that desire to have this childlike innocence our whole life. We want that wonder and amazement of being a child, but we can't really retain it because the world becomes heavier as we get older. And so Palmer reflects that age and wisdom and that cynicism that we gain as we get older because of everything we have to go through. Of course, we don't go through what Palmer goes through on a daily basis, but we all have our own ghosts and skeletons and so forth that we have to deal with. And so in developing those two characters, I drew upon the dream. The individual that I knew, he himself had a seizure in middle school, and his intellectual capacity was stunted in prepubescence. And so with that experience, I knew that if I was trading baseball cards with him and I went over to his house, which is only right across the street, like kitty corner on a 4-corner road, I had to have my father with me to go see him. But all of my other friends that were my age, I could go play street hockey with them, and my parents didn't have to be there. It wasn't an issue.
Oh, wow.
And so when I woke up, I really had to ask myself the question, why was it so important for my father to be there? Was it because he was twice my age and a very large? Was it because he was intellectually handicapped, the correct term at the time, disabled, right? Or was it because he was Black? And I didn't know the answer. And so those became primary themes in A Disturbing Nature. And they make up the two primary themes. So that was the reason for Disturbing Nature coming about. The story itself deals with, it opens with us being introduced to the two main characters in a tense situation. There's an interrogation, and FBI Chief Investigator Francis Palmer is interrogating. He's asking the final question to Mo Lumen, the 24-year-old who's moved up from Virginia, and the killings in Rhode Island, in and around Rhode Island and southeastern Massachusetts, started to occur when Mo Lumen arrived in Rhode Island. And so he's asking him the question, are you the pastoral predator? And the reader is left wondering, how is it possible that Mo Lumen does not know whether he's the killer? Because we watch him squirm and squeeze his baseball cards. The baseball cards are a symbol of innocence, youthful innocence, because the way we treat them when we're young is not the way we treat them when we're older. And we now use them to sell and try and make money for a lot of people. Back then, you didn't worry about the value of a baseball card in 1975. So it was a kid's thing. Cards were catering to kids and their desire to see their heroes in pictures on bubblegum cards.
Wow. And you know what? People like that scare people because they don't understand how to connect. So it's like Rain Man, and then the character in The Grapes of Wrath, right? Think about that. You know,
you nailed it.
It's that fear of, and that they could do something, but it would be, they'll go, it's a mental health thing, or, you know what I mean? It's like, we don't know. And so that's probably why your dad took you, because he's like, I don't know. But then if he's Black, then now it's a prejudice thing.
But you don't know. The truth is, I don't know. My father died many years ago, so I don't know the answer to the question.
Wow.
So it was a lot of speculation. The book then becomes a great deal of speculation around the psychology of different characters, primarily the two main characters. And what happens is we meet this young man, and Nancy, I know you know this now, he's lovable. I think
you feel sorry for him in a way.
Yeah, I don't know if there's any way to put it other than you say you really have this connection with him because you don't see him respond in ways that you would expect someone his age to respond in those situations. He's very childlike.
He has a different kind of intellect. Okay.
And that was
it's kind of a primal intellect in a way.
Well, and it's nurtured by the angels in his life.
Yeah.
Because the book is, even though it's not a religious book in any way, it is written over the book of Revelations. So people don't understand that because they won't get all the symbolism in it unless it's explained. You'll see the lake of fire later, but what you do see are the angels. You see the beast of the sea and the beast of the land. You've met them, Emily and Veronica. But you see the angels, and those all have blonde hair, which are his mother, his grandmother, Mrs. Harrington, the 6th grade teacher, and Kay. So
all angels have blonde hair.
Well, I don't know that that's necessarily true, but it was kind of important to the story. It doesn't imply all the people that had dark hair or brown hair are bad.
Really.
But in the book,
Really.
it does create this separation for symbolism purposes.
Mhm.
And so even the 7 letters on the 7 churches in Revelations
Mhm.
come up when he's talking about when he's thinking back to his
See,
father.
I love stuff like that. I think when you get into symbolism, it becomes so much fun, and it's like another set of riddles, especially when you think about
Mhm.
murders and how, you know, like we were talking about how criminals, these killers do leave their mark in some way, and there's a lot of symbolism attached. I think that's why people watch crime series,
Well,
because
it's astounding.
it, yeah,
And we have so many crime movies and detective TV series where we watch fake murders happen daily on the television as entertainment. Now, if you
Yeah.
think about that for a little bit, and then you take somebody with a mind that isn't exactly processing things the way we are processing it, how much damage does TV do to someone who can't really process the information accurately?
And when does
Ooh.
it start desensitizing them?
Yeah, because I mean, if you think about it, if you work in a slaughterhouse, you get used to blood and guts flinging everywhere, and you're like, whatever. Somebody walking into a slaughterhouse for the first time is not feeling well.
Well, and that reminds me of something that's been surprising. I've had several situations where even professional reviewers, reviewing agencies, have come back and said, well, Palmer's addiction to I can't think of, anyway, what he takes. It was the most commonly prescribed drug from 1968 to 1982. It was the Rolling Stones' Mother's Little Helper.
oh, Valium.
Valium, thank you. I know it was a V, but I could not think of the word, and I sincerely apologize.
If it's musical,
Okay, Lisa, I gotta look over
If it's
you
music,
now.
I have the answer.
In truth, I got to be honest with you. I had Viagra stuck in my head, and I knew that wasn't the right one. So
Wow, that he's
didn't want to throw that one out there. When
the
I was trying to
Viagra
do
killer.
that.
No,
But anyway,
just kidding.
people don't understand when they read the book because most readers were not around or old enough to remember 1975. But at that time, it was by far the most common prescription drug. And it was very common among law enforcement. In order to help
really? I
them
didn't know
sleep
that.
when they
I know
were
that.
dealing with seeing
Oh,
victims, murder
and
victims, so forth. And so
PTSD.
Palmer and everything that he had witnessed, he was prescribed Valium, and he didn't say anywhere in the book that he was addicted to it. What it says is that for a couple of weeks after a case would close, he would take it to help him sleep.
Yeah.
That would have been very normal in society at that time. But I have these reviewers going, well, Palmer being a drug addict. But no, he's not.
He's not in the Valley of the Dolls.
There's plenty of drugs that people take today to help them cope, and nobody's going to
The
call them
Mother's
a
Little
drug addict.
Helper's now moved on to Oxycontin, hasn't it? I think.
How do you-
but we
how
wouldn't
do
call
you
them
look
drug
at it?
addicts today.
But how do you look at a crime scene day after day after day as your job? You get paid to go look at these horrible things that people do to each other. And I mean, do you really desensitize to the point where you're not affected by the horrible things that you're seeing every day?
No, I think the truth is the reason why people think that there's this trope, this common detective that deals with these type of situations, is the reality is that they have to be hard-boiled and they have to learn to deal with stuff that other people could only imagine. And they watch it. They're watching it on a movie, and it's for entertainment. It isn't the grim reality of the worst segments of our society. And so when you look at someone like Investigator Palmer, he's seeing this nonstop for more than a decade, dealing with the most heinous mass murderers of that time. He's seen everything.
I think it does live on you. I mean, I always wonder that about our police force now and our military, and how much they see and how much help do they get? Do they even want to get help? Do they know when they need help? Because it is traumatic. I mean, when you see, Nancy and I have seen stuff. I mean, we've lived in Africa and half my life, and in places that we've seen so much guns and face bombs, you name it. We've seen it and been through it. And it does, you don't think so because you become very, very hardcore. You get this water off
And
the duck's
aware.
back. But at some point, just one, finger in the water and that shell can just shatter. So it really is, you're playing a game with yourself.
Mhm.
Well,
I mean, truly, honestly, you play a game with yourself about that strength outside because it's there and it will creep in if you
and
don't get some kind of help.
imagine what occurs in that environment. So when we look at Frank Palmer, the chief investigator, what's really happening with him? He's lost touch with humanity. He has virtually no close friends.
Right.
There's no humor in him at all. He's thinking of his daughters when he's touching the pictures of Ted Bundy's victims.
Yeah.
I mean, it's very hard to
That's
imagine
messed up, man.
How a person, recovers from that type of trauma, and particularly without help. And so what Palmer has done, and this is somewhat a-traditional, he's created a beast within himself. He has the beast inside himself. You're introduced to him very quickly. The first Palmer chapter starts with the beast. And that's because that is Palmer's alter ego. It's what he has created to protect what's left of his humanity. But this beast is able to communicate with the monsters. They can feel what they feel and see what they see. That's how he captures them. And so the unique thing in this story is, then the unique thing in the story is, as you get to the second half, the book is laid out like a jigsaw puzzle. When you get a jigsaw puzzle, 1,000-piece jigsaw puzzle, and you have to open the box, then you start taking the pieces out, then you have to find the four corners, then you get all the edges and you put them in a pile, then you mix the colors, or you match the colors with those piles, then you start putting it together. It doesn't make any sense to me to do a psychological thriller. This wasn't written like a post-1960 novel. This is written like a pre-1960 novel, before we were exposed to everything right in front of us, when sex is sensationalized and gore is graphic. And this is written for individuals that really want to get to know the characters and really understand that time period. It's historical literature more than it is a crime drama, so that you first immerse yourself in the environment with the characters to understand their motivations. And then once we have that in place, once the puzzle pieces are all laid out and we have the four corner pieces, now we can start putting the puzzle together. And the second half becomes that thrill ride that you want from an investigation. But I believe it's a much greater thrill ride and much more confusing because you've been introduced to all the different characters. So you are really trying to remember all of this information. To help you, I give you chapter titles, not something very common in novels today, much older, right? And that's because they're all pieces to the puzzle. When you see the girl who moved one stool over, the man behind the meat counter, you're going to come back and you're going to remember them better by that than you will by their name.
Why did they get rid of chapter names? Because it's cool. That was always like, you knew there was like an incident or like an emotional happening or something. And who decided we need to have chapter 1, chapter 2?
Well,
I mean, come on. It's,
you know what I think?
what a waste of creativity.
But I think some of it comes down to, very simply, there are more and more things competing for people's time with respect to entertainment and anything else they can do, hobbies. And there's so much that there's the wealth in the country is the greatest it's ever been. Right? I could make the argument that's on the basis of easy money, but the fact of the matter remains that no time in history has such a large portion of the population been able to enjoy so many different things outside of work. And so in a way, rather than people having more time, what they've done is condition themselves to having less time. And sitting down and spending 10 hours reading a novel doesn't somehow compare to 2 hours watching a movie. Or a few hours going and all the different things, surfing or shooting bow and arrow, or it's amazing, particularly living in California, all the different things people can find to do. So you're competing with a very different set of circumstances and demographics today than, say, Mark Twain would have faced, or even Harper Lee would have faced in the late 50s and early 60s. And in writing novels today, I think they tend to cater to very quick, easy to digest information. And even though they don't want to acknowledge that their characters are somewhat tried and true, or that they are patterned after other characters, it's kind of like watching the Superman or Spider-Man or Hulk or Marvel or
Mhm.
DC movies. You only need about a minute to know who Doctor Strange is, even if you've never read the comic books, because he's going to wash his hands the first few seconds while he's a doctor. Right? Because of the way he's washing it, and you can tell it's a hospital. Then he's going to go in and he's going to be answering questions about music while he's performing surgery, and you're going to realize he's an eccentric genius. Right? And then he's going to talk to one of the nurses, and we're going to realize that he's conceited, arrogant, and a ladies' man. You're done. You don't need anything else to know about him. It took about a minute and a half. It's not a great development of a character. It's going to make you think of Iron Man as a doctor as opposed to a war manufacturer and engineer. That's all it does, but that's what they want. Very quick.
Okay, but now look at your character, Palmer. After about the 10th chapter, I thought to myself that Palmer would really hate Columbo. Like he would hate to watch the TV series Columbo, the bumbling detective who does everything wrong, but he's got this like personality. And I just thought, just think about how we watched Columbo and accepted the bumbling detective personality. So now I'm thinking most detectives would hate Columbo.
The funny part, I watched the entire Columbo series from start to finish right after I finished the novel, simply because I remembered it as a kid and I wanted to see this contrast. It's just the weirdest thing that you brought up Columbo, because that was the one I sat down and watched all the episodes. And obviously in each episode, you're limited to a couple of candidates that are the possible suspects or the killer. Right. And usually you can guess pretty well halfway through the story, because at that point he's trying to prove who it is that they did it, rather than trying to identify who did it, right? So it's a different setup altogether. Murder, She Wrote is very similar in that way. I think, however, in truth, Palmer would admire a few things about Columbo. Really? And that is, I think that Columbo, after watching the whole thing, we recognize that whole aloof kind of bumbling his way through is all an act.
Yes,
and that's how he endears himself with some of the individuals that he needs information from, including the killer in most cases, who then will make the mistake on the basis of thinking that they can easily fool this idiot detective. Most detectives come off like Palmer, cool, calm, competent, and capable. I think Columbo, what he did, all I think Palmer would admire about Columbo is he takes a different angle. He's very personable, very bumbling, as you point out, and it comes across as not very intelligent. And yet at the end of the day, he gets these people to open up and provide information in much the same way that the one that is often the case now on TV, where they get the guy up against the wall and say, "You're going to answer. I don't care about, not being able to assault the suspect. You're going to answer these questions." That's kind of become the typical. We think back to The French Connection and Gene Hackman. That's kind of your model for all police detectives.
Yeah, I like the character development, because it goes back to the craft. And it goes back to the art, and we always talk about British and even Canadian comedy or TV, or just it's all about character versus the big bang boom that we do, very glitzy, glamorous American style. But I do see through Netflix and Hulu and all these outlets that we're getting actors and writers, and everyone's able to have a little bit more leeway into character development. So I think that will help books. I think that movies and TVs help the books, and vice versa, obviously.
I think that the series, the way that series are done now on programs or platforms like Netflix, really helps to promote the opportunity to create more character development. When I watch a show like I did recently, The Fall, on Netflix, which is a serial killer, 3-season, 6 episodes per season show. It was really good. And I know a lot of people would probably find it slow when they're developing. Another one is North Waters, which is another great serial killer movie or series that is, a lot of people would probably watch it and go, it's kind of slow, but I think they're finding their audience. And I think for me, I'm finding the same thing. The book is sold extremely well to this point. I'm not saying it's going to that it's surprising me or not surprising me. I did have some of the advantages that a lot of independent writers don't have, which is a PR firm and so forth. So it's sold pretty well in non-traditional spaces, meaning a lot of people are purchasing it directly from me so that they can have it autographed and so forth.
Oh, that's nice.
I'm not so much worried about rank and what shows up on Amazon or here or there. It doesn't matter. At some point, I believe that the right audience finds this type of novel. And there is definitely an audience for it because people like Tana French and Dennis Lehane have no fear of writing books that are 130, 40, or 50,000 words and having the audience absorb the fact that the settings and the characters.
Well, there's true readers out there. I mean, there really are people who want to dig into the character and, they paint him in their mind. But I want to go to the killer here, the pastoral predator. Come on. So like I just see like a vulture, man. But but I mean, that's like cool. I mean, that's a thing. They do have their branding and they want to get known as like the suitcase stuffer, whatever.
Yeah.
Well,
what's interesting in the book, and again, when you're reading it, you might miss these connections, but we have each one of the primary characters having similar circumstances throughout the first half of the book that drive their behavior, their makeup, and their psyche. And so you'll see Palmer and his experience fishing with his father, which is a very dramatic and hopefully touching scene. And you see Moe's experience with his father. And of course, we have the symbolism of the black-haired critters. And I don't know what percentage of readers fully understand that the black-haired critters represent the sins of Moe's forefathers. They get tangled up in the trees because they are the blacks in southern United States that are being hung and then cut down by the whites. That's why it's presented the way that it is. But as a general statement for Moe carrying through the stories of his father, it's somewhat unlikely very many blacks were hung in Virginia during the Jim Crow law period. In fact, there are very few documented on the sites. It was not an area like Alabama or Mississippi. So it was, for me, the right place to choose because the Rappahannock River formed the boundary between what I saw as Bible Belt, Jim Crow laws, South United States, and North, which was more institutional and interpersonal racism. And so that forms that boundary, but we have that bridge, the Kelly's Ford Bridge, and that's where his father is talking to him. Now, whether or not those stories are true that his father is telling him, he certainly enjoys telling him with Earl there, and they become that type of interpersonal racism that Moe carries, even if he's not aware of it. And so in the book, I'm not sure people pick up on these symbols. So what I'm doing now on my social media is providing the symbols to let people understand where they exist. The black-haired critters represent racism. And it's very clear they represent racism in the book as you keep moving through it. Moe's thoughts will get darker and darker and darker as he tries to imagine himself, because he has black hair, as one of those black-haired critters floating down the Rappahannock.
Wow.
I can hear my grandmother's voice when I'm certain chapters. It's just, I could hear my grandmother say, "I told you it's better to stick to your own kind."
Oh my gosh.
I know.
Oh my gosh.
No,
oh my gosh.
But that's what you're trying to do. You're trying to get people to remember just minor things like I did when I woke up from that dream. Just little things, coincidences at the time, or things you didn't understand, or words that were said that you didn't make sense out of then, that in the context of where we are today, raise for us some concerning questions about what may linger
Definitely
in the way that we look at things.
I think it's passed down, genetically too. Like, it's things just, I don't know if they've done studies on it, but it's not just, great grandfather had a thing about tomatoes and I do too, so we're related, it's part of our genes. But emotionally, what are we sending down through our DNA chain? You know what I mean? Why wouldn't you feel a burden? I mean, why not? It's part of our makeup. It goes into our cells. There are chemicals involved in it. So I really do think trauma from years before does genetically shift through our bodies. I just can't prove it, but
Well,
I just think it's true.
My concern is this in the novel. So the counter to one of the primary themes, which is the heredity of prejudice and the hypocrisy of privilege. What I'm really setting up here is the question of who assigns guilt. And by that, what I mean is when we look at a character like Mo Lumen, who is harmless and who gets along with the Black characters at least as well as he does the white characters. His best friend as a child was Sam, who was the Black character that worked for his father. There's no prejudice in him that's apparent. His boss now, if you get the ironic nature of him having had Sam work for his father, who was the boss, and then as his first job, he now works for a Black boss. So it's been flipped in the post-Jim Crow law period, post-1965. And so it's when we look at Mo, we wonder, well, what racism, what prejudice, bigotry does he carry in him? And we'll see that somewhat exposed as you move through the second half. And you'll continue to feel for him because of his age. It's from the perspective of someone that would be 11 years old. So if you're 11 and your father was a racist in 1950 or 1960, you didn't see that as abnormal. You saw that as part of what it was to be an adult. And so when we start thinking that we have eradicated or that we could eradicate prejudice, bigotry in our society, we only have to look at the 20th century and even up to today to look at the atrocities, whether it would be Hitler's Germany and treatment of the Jews. It doesn't have to be prejudice against Blacks as minorities. It's prejudice against any race, creed, color. And so we have to continue with the dialogue. I get concerned when I hear statements like, you should feel guilty for what your grandparents, your great-grandparents, and your great-great-grandparents did.
Yeah.
And I go, wait a minute, if you're assigning guilt on me, let's think about what that is, or on anyone for that matter. Let's think about what that implies. That implies that when you have a gang lord or a drug lord in an urban ghetto that may well be Latin American, may well be Black, it doesn't matter, that they may, in the course of their dealings, shoot and kill. And even, as we know, occasionally hit the innocent bystander that may well be a child. We've all seen the hate you give, right? Do we blame that drug lord or gang lord's 2-year-old son or daughter for the actions of his father? No, anybody would look at that and go, you can't do that. So as a society, we cannot heal. If we honestly believe on one side the problem is gone, which it is not. Racism, bigotry still exists today. But it's not going to heal on the other side if we want to continue to say, you better feel the guilt from what your forefathers did. Well, no, let's address what we do. We have enough issues ourselves to have to be dealing with
and you can't change it.
Dead and gone.
Well, I think the arts
you
do
can't
it.
change anything that's already happened anyway. So
No,
it's
you've got
wasted.
it's connectivity, and I think through the arts tell the truth, no matter how you look at it. Whether it's fiction, it's still telling the truth. Like what you're doing, it's fiction, but it's still telling the truth. And the arts, through music, literature, movies, you name it, dance, poetry, it tells the truth. And it allows people to think about heavy issues or heavy, things in life on a term that they can, we need it for the medicine, basically. It is the sugar, on the medicine. It allows people to breathe it, think about it, go through it on their own without anybody telling them what to do. And that's the thing about art. No one can tell you, you must believe this, you must act this way. No, the arts open your mind for you to draw your own conclusions of how to handle it. And that, to me, is the beauty of it. And that is how we can move forward and connect, because we can talk about books, talk about movies, talk about things together, have a discussion without yelling at each other. So I think, with everybody having these big arguments across the country and around the world, just read a book listen to some music and connect on that. So in that spirit, on our last question, what about doing a book club? Are you going to do that? Because with all the symbolism and everything, it'd be fascinating.
We have a group of them that are coming up. Folks are reading it. Again, it's a long novel and it was just released. So we're giving folks time to read, but we know of several that will be engaging in. The PR firm just ran a book club promotion through Book Trib. So we hope to get from there. I have no problem appearing in person. I really don't, to discuss this, because I think it's very important for people to understand this is not just a serial killer thriller. It is written more like what you would have seen in To Kill a Mockingbird, for example. I am not implying that it is written as well as To Kill a Mockingbird. I don't pretend to be Hopper Lee. But what I'm encouraged by is, to date, we've gotten a lot of reviews and feedback across all the different platforms, whether it's NetGalley or I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head, but Amazon now are starting to come in. Goodreads, I'm sorry, was the one I couldn't think of. But they're starting to come in, as well as all of the award committees and so forth. What we're finding is, for those that have physical copies of the book and read the entire book, they are uniformly 4 or predominantly 5 stars. Because I think they get much more out of the novel, seeing the historic feel of it. When you feel the book in your hands, you realize you're not reading a new novel, something that's intended to be written in today's style. And I think people get that, and so they absorb the character development.
There's no hashtags in there, Nancy.
No, there'll be none in there. It wasn't around. But I think that what we're finding is that even for those, and we've had a handful, 5 or 6, that have given it 2 stars. No one's given it 1 star. So we did have one just said they didn't read it and they left 1 star. I'm not sure why, but we've had 5 or 6 2 stars out of the 80 or 90, whatever the number's been.
It's not bad at all.
And in each case, and almost no 3 stars, because nobody sits on the fence. They either love it or like it, or they just didn't want to read it. They were bored reading it. What we found is that the 2 stars come from people who read the ebook. And I think that's because when you're looking at a device, you're used to looking at sound bites and quick videos and stuff and doing research. You're not used to sitting down and reading a book that's going to take you 10 hours. And most people that are reading ebooks are probably looking for the quick 80,000 word read that gets right to the point. You know, there's explosions and people dying and sex and everything else. And so I think they need to do some studies on that, because we're finding even among students, they did a study where they offered students either a physical copy of their textbook or an electronic copy. The physical copy cost money. The electronic copy was free.
But
more than 70% of the kids chose the physical copy.
I mean, I use a Kindle because we're on the road permanently, and it works, you know.
Oh, yeah.
And it took some getting used to. I mean, I picked it up a couple of years ago, read a couple things on it and put it away and went, I just really want the real book. Now, because I'm used to it now, but I understand what you mean. The book is cozy. It's a book is a ritual. It's a ritual. Like
it's part of having your coffee. Yeah, it's your coffee, or you go to bed. You go to bed reading a psychological thriller. That's the best, because you know, happy sleeping.
But you're right.
Pastoral predator is going to get you.
I know. So it is a different feel having to read it on a computer or a Kindle, but I think it comes through just as well as a book. I think, I prefer a copy of the book, but that's not possible for us. It doesn't make sense. But
I think part of that
draws you in. It draws you in anyway. So
I think, again, the distinction, I did all kind of research at the Pentagon level and White House level for years. And so we would look at things like this, right? These patterns and these trends. And, you know, a large portion of the audience today, you're a reader like I am. It does not bother me to pick up a book that's 500 pages and read it.
No,
a lot of readers today that are the reviewers are people that make themselves goals for the year. They're going to read 100 books or 120 books. No. They're not all that excited to open up an ebook that reads, depending on how they optimize it, between almost 800 pages and 1,100 pages. They get intimidated by it. So when they're reading it, and there's a lot of character development early on and mystery creating, for many, their ability to retain information on an electronic device is less. They know that these studies have been done scientifically for non-applications for reading, like Kindle. So we already know that that's why sound bites work in this era of social media. And the younger the generations get, the more they're inclined to have shorter and shorter media presence. So you'll see 1-minute
I
videos
agree
on
with that.
Instagram, but it's
Mhm.
follow on TikTok, you don't exceed 30 seconds, right?
Yeah.
And that's because how long are people really going to pay attention, even to something that's supposedly humorous or so forth? So we do have a bit of a crisis of concentration in our
Mhm.
society, and that's creating some of the issues that I think we see in trying to understand major issues. And so things
Well,
like themes and
yeah.
symbolism will often get lost, particularly,
Mm.
I think, to younger readers. When they're looking at a device as opposed to when they're reading a
See,
book.
but I like that. That's why poetry
Yeah.
is so important, because poetry is symbolism all hidden within all these. Every time you read, I mean, good poetry, you go in there and you'll read it once and then you'll read it twice and
Yeah.
you'll be like, oh, look at this. And then you'll read it again, put
Mhm.
it down, come back to it, and I hope poetry doesn't go away because it makes people slow down. And it gets back to the craft of an actual word,
Mhm.
this beautiful word. What is the word? The bird's the word.
The bird.
But no, but it is
No,
that, it's
no, you're absolutely right. It's finally becoming a writer as an older guy, and I actually got help to learn to write from a 8-time #1 New York Times bestselling thriller author. I hired him to help me for
Oh,
8
cool.
Did not write any part of the book. If you talk to me, he would tell you he did not write one word. But he looked at
Okay.
my original draft, which was a linear story, and he said, well, you don't build the suspense this way. And so he helped me figure out how to lay a story out, to be able to create suspense and mystery and then unveil that in layers later. And so it was worthwhile. It was probably the best 8 months of my life. But now as I sit down and I'm in the process of finishing up this final draft of the second book, I can spend literally 2 hours on one word. It's like ridiculous how sincerely you try. And what I was trying to get to, my point in saying that we have these 5 or 6 people that have provided 2 stars. And one thing I've noticed that if people give lower scores, they like to put it on every platform. People give higher scores, they'll put it on the one platform they're on. But if they give lower scores, they just want to get out there and put it everywhere. I love
Yeah. Oh,
it.
yeah.
But it's fun.
Funny.
To be honest with you, for me, it's fun. And I expect to have a compilation post here in the next couple of weeks where I'm going to put up all the negative things that are said. Because I think it's fair, right? We have a tendency always to promote, a 5-star review from here, 4-star review. I think it's nice to be able to just put a compilation together and say, and oh, by the way, like anyone else, we get lousy reviews. Here they are. They don't bother me. The book wasn't written for you. It was written for me, and it was written for an audience that wants to enjoy this type of novel. What else do I have to say? I think that was one of the nice things about coming out of business and having 500 employees. There was never a decision I made that made all 500 happy, unless I gave them all a 10% raise at the same time.
I was going to say, you had to do the free ham.
But almost every decision
But
had
the
a
free
part of
ham
the
for
audience was
Christmas.
happy. And trust me, even in the situation where you would give everybody a 10% raise, you would still have someone that was in a lower pay category that would come in and complain, being jealous that the person who had a higher salary should have got a lower percentage.
That's why Nancy and I that's why we run our business the way we run it. And I do want to go back. It's really interesting. Like, I cannot stand the Kindle. I will read books on my computer, on my laptop as a PDF. And I do a lot on my phone. Nancy won't do a phone. So, I mean, we're weird, but we're print people. I mean, Nancy had a magazine in South Africa, and she was like one of the first people creating our own film to take to the printer, and then coming with a disc and going, here's how to print this. And they're looking at her like, what?
What are you talking
we're
about?
still typesetting. So I mean, when I was a kid, I learned how to typeset, like, with glue and things, So it's a really weird process to now be digital. And it's different. Now we can have full color without the expense. Thank you. That's really cool. But it is an interesting mix, because we are the big blend, no matter what, if it's our art magazine or our travel, you have to have big imagery. There's articles that are written by some of our writers that are intense and long. And then we have to go, okay, you're only that one's going in. We can't have 10 of them. So we have to go, oh, here's a short and sweet to keep it's this weird balance, because our audience goes from 25 to 75 typically, which is, and then in the middle.
Yeah,
it's because what we're finding is a mystery lover will be a mystery lover whether they're 25 years old or 75, and it's like, how do you appeal to them on that? So we're seeing, it used to be only this age group, or even in travel. Oh, the authentic traveler. Well, guess what? The authentic traveler is the same age. If they want a real experience, they want a real experience, so
it's a personality, not an age.
So it's a very interesting thing to see over the years, how we're changing And while people are getting short in and out, quick stuff, I think COVID changed a little bit of that. COVID got people to sit down and enjoy a book and realize, okay, I may have to do this short, quick stuff for business or blah, blah stuff, but I'm now going to read a book and enjoy it. So I think we're in a little shift, and it's going to keep shifting because the world is really shifting right now. You know, it's up, down, all around. So the next 5 years, no matter what, everyone, read a book, enjoy a movie, have a glass of wine.
Yeah, chill.
And just find those moments, because it does us all good, no matter how rough life is, to take that time out. And that's what the beauty of books are and what you're doing. And so you've got a series. Once Nancy is done reading A Disturbing Nature, I have to give it a few months. And once your interview is done, I need to give it a few months, because she tells me everything in a book that she's
I'm not
reading.
gonna tell you
And then I
yet.
get to, and so by the time I'll get to yours and I'll get the second one, it'll all be great. But congratulations on your first book. It's got to feel good.
It's good.
I appreciate that.
Very
You know, 30 something years in the making. Yeah, I felt pretty good.
No, good for you. Good for
Hey,
you.
well, you're in California wine country, so it's all good, right? It's all
Mhm.
good. Well, thank you.
Unfortunately, I don't drink. So
Oh.
now you're thinking maybe he really is a serial killer.
No,
That's your first step.
Well, you've got to have some kind of something, right? You know, but everyone, again, Brian-LeBeau.com is the website, and he's on social media, so follow him there for some symbology. And I always like to say symbolic. I don't know. Now I'm going to get my languages all messed up. But
Symbology?
That's okay.
It's a
You're speaking
symbolism.
Dan Brown's language now.
see,
No,
I'm
she's
I'm,
speaking Kenyan.
I know. We've been around the world in interviews the last few days, so now I'm like
It's not
completely.
symbology. Symbolism is the word.
Don't start me. I'm going to get all weird again.
Or allegory. It's an allegorical
Allegory is
tale.
good.
It's allegory. No, it's
Allegory.
allegedly. All right. Brian-LeBeau
Oh, boy.
is the name. The book is A Disturbing Nature. It's out now. Go to brianlebo.com, of course, Amazon, all those great places. And if you do read it, leave him a review, good, bad, or other, and do it in multiple platforms.
It's all good. It's all good.
In multiple platforms. But thank you so much for joining us. It's been quite a great chat. Thank
I
you.
appreciate it. Lisa, Nancy, I've had a great time.
Good,
Thank you.
good.